Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I'm going to be walking you through a couple of series that I have decided to stop reading. For every single one of these series, I have read at least the first book. I do just want to add one short disclaimer in that this has nothing to do with the authors themselves. This is all to do with the issues that I personally had with the books. No hate towards anybody. This is just my personal opinion. So with that in mind, let's jump in. So the first series on my list is the Gentleman Bastard series by Scott Lynch, with the first book being The Lies of Locke, Lamora. This was a series that I was actually really excited to read because I had generally heard only very, very positive things about. I read it and I have to say I was not that impressed, to be honest with you. I think there were some things that were really going for it, like the world building, and I think some of the character relationships were quite interesting. But overall, I think this is the sort of book that didn't really live up to its potential. There are a lot of issues with it that I found quite difficult to contend with. As an example, I've said this many times before on my channel that I think flashbacks are really, really hard to do. And I don't like the way the author wove in the flashbacks to the point where you'd get to a really, really exciting bit in the current narrative and then it would quickly shift to something that had happened in the past. But at that point, I didn't really care because it was just chopping and changing so much that it completely disrupted the reading flow. I have heard that the series gets better, but I just have so many other books, as you can see in the background, that I want to read. I just didn't like it enough to want to continue on with the story. I think the other key thing for me is that, and I've said this many times on my channel before, and I'm sure I will say it many times again in the future, the characters are probably the most important thing for me. I have to connect with the characters on some sort of level. I have to feel some sort of kinship to the characters, even if they're like the worst people in the world. I have to feel some sort of connection to them. Some of my favorite authors are masters at doing this, and that's why they're my favorite authors. But I just did not really care about any of the characters. I didn't really care about where they were going. The only one character that I was actually interested in ended up getting killed off, and it really frustrated me. And I think, unfortunately, while the idea of this series sounds really appealing to me, it kind of fell flat in every way that I didn't expect it to, if that makes sense. And it was incredibly disappointing. So this is one that I'm definitely not going to be picking up, even though I have heard generally very good things about the later books. But at this point, I'm not invested, and I don't necessarily think that's going to change. The next one on my list is the Sansi trilogy by Chelsea Abdullah, with the first book being The Stardust Thief. This book was an okay read when I first read it. I remember actually talking about it quite positively. I quite like the writing style. I think the main reason why I loved it so much is because it reminded me of one of my favourite fantasy series of all time, and that is the David Bad trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty. But what I realised after finishing it and like really sitting with that book is that there are so many parallels that I think that's why I loved it. It wasn't necessarily for the writing or for the characters or for the world building. Like, I don't think there was anything specific. It was just because it reminded me of David Bad, and because I have such positive memories of reading that trilogy, it kind of then, in a weird way, shifted how I thought about that book. But now that I've kind of come out of that haze, I mean, I still love the David Bad trilogy. I still think everybody should go and read it. I did kind of realise that those rose-tinted glasses were on because I was just dying for another series that reminded me of that other series. When I started the second book a few weeks ago, I just couldn't get into it. And I realised it's because my attachment to that book wasn't because the book itself was something that I thought was a really good piece of art, if that makes sense. It was because it reminded me of another piece of art that I absolutely love. And I don't think that's a good enough reason to read a series, if that makes sense. I had no connection to the characters. I felt bored. I got like 20-30% into the book and I just was so disconnected to what was happening that I ended up DNFing the book, which I rarely do. And have decided that I'm not going to finish this series because I simply just don't care, and that's okay. Then the next one that I have on my list is the Nevernight trilogy by J. Kristoff, with the first book being Nevernight, and that book is atrocious. It is atrocious, and I mean that with all the respect in the world, because I love Empire of the Vampire. It has its own issues, don't get me wrong, but there were aspects of that first book that I really, really enjoyed. The second book was not great in my opinion, which I know is an unpopular one. The first book was really, really solid. But then I read Nevernight because I was just really curious about it because I'd heard so many mixed things about it. And it is just the worst. Our main character has a boob job. She's 16 years old and she has a boob job so that she can be a better spy. It is the most absurd writing I have ever read. I did like a 50 minute video kind of going through each chapter. It is honestly one of the most ridiculous books I have ever read. Why do you have to give a 16-year-old girl a boob job to be good at being an assassin? It's just the dumbest logic ever. It is the sort of book that really reads like a male fantasy, which is not something that I am particularly interested in reading. It gave me the ick. I felt disgusted as I was reading it, and it was just really poorly written. There are so many poorly done metaphors in that series. It is honestly quite something. And I honestly can't believe that it passed the editing block. There are just so many red flags in that book. I can't even imagine what the series is like as it continues on. It's also just a rip-off of Gladiator, which, come on, use your imagination, try something a bit different. But I mean, I've heard the author is a fan of Gladiator, so fair enough, it might be his homage to Gladiator, but like try something a bit different at the very least. I mean, I didn't even know that when I read the book. But literally as I was reading it, I was like, this just feels like Gladiator, but like a shitter version of it. So that's why I've decided to stop reading that series, because I genuinely think it would make me go insane. Next, we have the Sarantium Mosaic Duology by Guy Gavriel Kay, with the first book being Sailing to Sarantium. Now, the first book was okay. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. There were aspects of it that I really loved. I loved the first half of the book. The second half like really meandered for me, and I couldn't quite keep my attention up as much as I did for the first half, which is also an unpopular opinion. I feel like this video should just be DNFing series that everybody else seems to love. But it's not a bad book by any means. I just didn't really feel any sense of connection to the main character or the other characters to the point where I feel the urge to keep reading. I have generally had very good experiences with Guy Gavriel Kay's books. There's one or two that I've really disliked, and then there's like 2 or 3 that are like some of my favorite books of all time. So net, I'm like very positive on his books, but this one was just very meh to me. I think unless someone is really able to convince me to read the second book, I will probably end up gifting it to somebody else, because I just have no interest in continuing that story. And plus, there's so many of his other books that I do genuinely want to really read. So I think it's best probably just to prioritize them over a series that I'm very meh on. Then the last one that we have on this list for today is the Founders Trilogy by Robert Jackson Bennett, with the first book being Foundryside. This book was very average and like maybe even slightly below average. I don't get it. It's a classic kind of heist story. I've said this many times before, I'm not a big fan of heist stories just because they often feel very repetitive and derivative of each other. And that definitely was the case in this series. The one thing I did really like about this book is the sentient kind of weapon, sentient object trope. That is a trope that I absolutely love. And I think that was actually done quite well in this book, but it wasn't done so well that I just want to abandon my feelings about the book and continue on the story. Like I don't care enough that that's going to compel me to read the second book in the series. I just think that the characters all sounded the same. The plot was very boring and typical of what you would expect for this type of story. It just felt very one note, and the writing was okay. It wasn't bad by any means. I wouldn't say like the world building or the writing was particularly inspiring or like really kind of captured my imagination by any means. Like, I think it was an okay book. I have heard mixed things about the next 2 books. As I've kind of said with other books on this list, I'm just not invested enough, and I just don't care enough to warrant reading another 2 books. Like, I just don't care, to be honest with you. It's the sort of series that I actually had really high hopes for, because I really like the setting and the kind of historical context that was used to influence the setting, but it just did nothing for me, unfortunately, and that's why I have decided to DNF the series. So there we have it. Those are 5 series that I have decided to stop reading. I'm not going to continue with any of these series. The only one that I might reconsider if somebody's able to convince me is the Sarantium duology. So if anybody is a die-hard fan, do let me know, and I will definitely reconsider it if somebody can convince me. But the rest of them, they are all off my shelves, off my Kindle. I just don't care. And yeah, Let me know down below in the comments if there's any series that you have decided to DNF. I've always find this really interesting, and I'll see you down below in the comments, folks. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in my next one. Stay safe, take care, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye.